The girl was standing at the edge of a cliff made of crystallized starlight when she turned to me and said, "You've always known me, Ethan. You just needed to forget me to believe again." Her words hung in the air like smoke, and I felt something ancient and familiar stir in my chest. Below us stretched an ocean of liquid memories, each wave carrying voices I recognized but couldn't place. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, but her eyes held the weight of centuries. When she reached out her small hand toward me, I saw the universe reflected in her palm like a snow globe containing all of existence. "Are you ready to see what comes after?" she whispered, and her voice was the sound of wind through wheat fields I remembered from childhood summers. I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt like I was finally coming home. My name is Ethan Marlowe, and 3 weeks ago, my grandmother Eleanor died in her sleep at 91. She'd raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. Eleanor was logic and warmth, crossword puzzles and homemade soup, the steady rhythm that kept my world spinning on its axis. I'm 34 now, a software engineer who builds systems that make sense, who troubleshoots problems with clean solutions. I believe in data, in code that compiles, in explanations that add up. Or at least, I used to. The funeral was on a Tuesday. Rain drummed against the chapel windows while the pastor spoke about eternal rest and God's plan. I sat in the front pew, dry-eyed and hollow, wondering how someone so essential to my existence could simply stop existing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind cycling through 27 years of memories. Eleanor teaching me to drive stick shift in her ancient Buick. Eleanor helping with algebra homework at the kitchen table. Eleanor holding my hand in the hospital when I broke my arm at 14. When I finally drifted off near dawn, something extraordinary happened. I became lucid in the dream with startling clarity. One moment I was falling through that familiar twilight space between consciousness and sleep, and the next I was standing in what looked like my grandmother's garden, but wrong somehow. The roses were too bright, their red so vivid it seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The sky was the color of vintage photographs, sepia and soft around the edges. That's when I saw her. A little girl stood by the gate, maybe 10 years old, wearing a simple white dress that seemed to catch light that wasn't there. Her hair was dark and hung straight to her shoulders. She was looking right at me with eyes that were simultaneously ancient and innocently young. "You're dreaming," she said, and her voice was like hearing music underwater. "I know," I replied, surprised that I could speak so clearly in the lucid state. "Who are you?" She tilted her head, studying me with an intensity that made my chest tight. "Will you follow me? I have something to show you." Every rational part of my brain screamed that following strange children in dreams was a terrible idea. But something about her felt safe, familiar in a way I couldn't name. She reminded me of someone, though I couldn't place who. "Where are we going?" I asked. She smiled, and it was like watching sunrise break over still water. "Somewhere you need to see." She turned and walked through the gate, and I followed. The landscape beyond the garden defied physics. We walked along a path that curved upward through the air, suspended over nothing. Below us, I could see fragments of different worlds floating like islands. A childhood playground, a library with books that glowed from within, a train station where the tracks led directly into stars. "How is this possible?" I asked. "Dreams don't follow the same rules," she said simply. They show us truth in ways waking minds can't understand. We walked in comfortable silence for what felt like hours. The path led us to a house I recognized, my childhood home, the one I'd lived in with my parents before the accident. But this version was constructed from memory and longing, its windows reflecting not the outside world, but moments from my past. "Why did you bring me here?" I asked. The girl stopped walking and looked at me with those impossibly deep eyes. "Because you need to remember what you've forgotten." She reached out and touched the front door, and it swung open soundlessly. Inside, the house was filled with warm golden light and the sound of voices. My mother singing in the kitchen, my father's laughter from the living room. The happiness was so intense, it was almost painful. "They're not really here," I said, but my voice cracked. "Aren't they?" she asked. "Memory is just another form of presence." I wanted to go inside, to lose myself in that impossible reunion, but something held me back. "This isn't real." The girl nodded slowly. "Reality isn't what you think it is, Ethan. You'll understand soon." The dream faded, and I woke with tears on my cheeks and a strange sense of peace I hadn't felt since Eleanor's death. The next night, she was waiting for me. This time, we stood in a vast library where the books had no words, only blank pages that somehow contained entire stories. The silence was profound, like standing inside a cathedral made of whispers. "What are you?" I asked her directly. "I'm what you need me to be," she replied, pulling a book from the shelf. When she opened it, images spilled out like living photographs, scenes of my life, but also scenes that hadn't happened yet. I saw myself older, sitting by a different bedside, holding the hand of someone I didn't recognize but loved deeply. "Those are futures that might be," she explained. "Time isn't a line here. It's more like a garden where everything grows at once." She showed me pages of moments I'd forgotten, small kindnesses I'd shown strangers, words of comfort I'd given to friends, the ripple effects of love spreading outward in ways I'd never seen. I watched myself at 7, crying after my parents' funeral, and saw how my grief had taught me to recognize pain in others, to offer exactly the comfort they needed. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you think ending means nothing," she said. "But every ending is just a door." The third night, she led me through a field of wheat that grew upward into infinity, each stalk reaching toward a sky that contained no horizon. The grain was golden and moved in wind that carried voices, not words, but pure emotion. Joy and sorrow and love all mixed together in harmonies that made my soul ache. "Listen," she whispered. I closed my eyes and let the voices wash over me. Slowly, I began to recognize them. My mother's laugh, my father's voice reading bedtime stories, and underneath it all, steady and warm like a heartbeat, was Eleanor's presence. "She's here," I said, not really understanding what I meant. "She never left," the girl replied. "Neither did your parents. Love doesn't end, Ethan. It just changes form." We sat in the wheat field while colors I had no names for painted themselves across the sky. Time moved differently here, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes not at all. The girl told me stories without words, showed me truths in the language of symbol and feeling. "What's your name?" I asked finally. She was quiet for so long, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed heartbreakingly familiar. "I don't have one anymore. Names are for the living." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "I'm between places now. Between what was and what comes next. The wheat around us began to shimmer and fade, and I felt myself being pulled back toward waking. But before I lost her completely, she pressed something into my hand, a flower that seemed to be made of condensed moonlight. "Keep this," she said. "You'll need it to remember." I woke clutching empty air, but I could still feel the flower's weight in my palm. The fourth night changed everything. I found myself in a place that wasn't quite a place, a space between spaces where thoughts took physical form and emotions had weight and texture. The girl was waiting, but she looked different now, more translucent, as if she was fading even as I watched. "I don't have much time left," she said, and her voice carried undertones of bells and distant thunder. "Time for what?" "To help you understand." She took my hands, and for the first time, her touch felt real and warm and achingly familiar. "Do you know who I am yet?" I stared into her face, searching for clues in features that seemed to shift and change like water. There was something about her eyes, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the particular quality of her smile that tugged at memories I couldn't quite reach. "Tell me," I whispered. She led me to what looked like a garden, but instead of flowers, it grew moments. Each plant was a crystallized memory, beautiful and fragile, and somehow alive. She stopped by a rosebush made of laughter and picked a bloom that showed me myself at 8 years old, baking cookies with someone whose face was just out of frame. "You made me forget," she said softly. The mind protects itself by hiding what's too painful to remember directly. Another flower showed me a hospital room, machines beeping, a small hand holding mine, while a voice I knew promised that everything would be all right. But the face was blurred, indistinct, like looking through fog. "I had to become someone else to reach you," she continued. "Someone your grief couldn't recognize and push away." The final flower showed me Eleanor at 10 years old, dark hair hanging straight to her shoulders, wearing a white dress for her first communion. She was smiling with pure joy before life had taught her about loss and disappointment and the slow erosion of years. My breath caught. "Eleanor?" "Hello, sweetheart," she said, and suddenly she was both the child and the grandmother, existing in multiple ages simultaneously. "I told you I'd never really leave you." The recognition hit me like a physical blow. How had I not seen it? The familiar mannerisms, the way she looked at me with such knowing love, the comfort I felt in her presence, even in the strangeness of dreams. "But you're dead," I said, and the words felt like tearing something open inside my chest. "Death is just another country," she replied gently. "I'm just visiting from somewhere you can't go yet." We sat together in the garden of memories, while she showed me glimpses of what lay beyond the veil of ordinary perception. It wasn't the heaven or hell of religious teachings, but something far more beautiful and complex, a place where consciousness existed in pure form, where love was the fundamental force that held everything together. "What happens when we die?" I asked. "We remember who we really are," she said. "We see that we were never separate, never alone. Every person we've loved, every kindness we've shown, every moment of beauty we've witnessed, it all becomes part of something larger." She showed me networks of connection, spanning across time and space, golden threads linking every soul that had ever existed. I saw how my parents' love had created me, how Eleanor's love had shaped me, how my own love would ripple outward to touch lives I couldn't imagine. "The sadness you feel when someone dies," she continued, "that's love with nowhere to go. But love doesn't disappear, Ethan. It just finds new forms." As she spoke, I felt something shifting inside me. The heavy grief that had weighed on my chest for weeks began to transform into something lighter but no less profound. Not the absence of Eleanor, but a different kind of presence. "Will I see you again?" I asked. "You'll see me everywhere," she said, beginning to fade. "In every act of kindness you witness, every moment of unexpected beauty, every time you help someone who's grieving. I'm not gone, sweetheart. I'm just scattered into everything you love." She pressed something into my hand, the moonlight flower from before, but now I could see it was really her locket, the one she'd worn every day for as long as I'd known her. "Remember," she whispered as the dream dissolved around us, "there's no end, just return. Remember that, and you'll never be afraid again." I woke with tears streaming down my face and Eleanor's locket clutched tight in my fist. I should have been startled to find a physical object from a dream in the real world. Instead, I felt only a deep sense of completeness, as if a puzzle I'd been working on my entire life had finally revealed its pattern. The locket was exactly as I remembered, worn silver with tiny scratches from decades of wear, containing a photo of my grandfather that had faded almost beyond recognition. But when I opened it now, there was something new inside, a pressed flower that seemed to catch and hold light in impossible ways. That was 6 months ago. I still dream of Eleanor sometimes, but not in the way I did before. Now she appears in small moments, a familiar laugh heard in passing, a gesture glimpsed from the corner of my eye, a feeling of being watched over when I'm facing something difficult. I've started volunteering at the hospice where she spent her final days. I sit with people who are dying, and I tell them what Eleanor showed me, that death is not an ending, but a transformation. That love persists beyond the boundaries of individual existence, that we are all connected by threads of gold that neither time nor distance can break. Some people think I'm crazy. Others nod with recognition, as if I'm confirming something they've always suspected but never dared to voice. I don't know if what I experienced was real in any objective sense. Maybe it was just my mind's way of processing grief, creating meaning from loss, finding hope in the face of existential terror. But I don't think it matters. What matters is that I no longer fear death, mine or anyone else's. What matters is that I've learned to see love as the fundamental force of existence, the energy that connects all things and makes meaning possible. What matters is that sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I can feel Eleanor's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder, reminding me that nothing truly precious is ever really lost. I keep her locket on my nightstand next to the impossible flower that shouldn't exist. Every morning when I wake up, they catch the first light of dawn and throw tiny rainbows on the wall, as if the universe itself is winking at me, letting me know that mystery and wonder are still possible in a world that often seems devoid of both. And sometimes in those moments between sleeping and waking, I hear a child's voice carried on wind that smells of wheat fields and summer rain, whispering the words that changed everything. There's no end, just return. I believe her,